Overfishing is the practice of commercial and non-commercial fishing which depletes a fishery by catching so many adult fish that not enough remain to breed and replenish the population. Overfishing exceeds the carrying capacity of a fishery, reducing stock levels to such an extent that they will no longer support a sufficient quantity of fish for sport or commercial harvest. This problem stems from worldwide fishing fleets that are 2 to 3 times as large as needed to take present-day catches of fish and other marine species, which our ocean cannot sustainably support. These fishing methods are unsustainable, impacting the function of marine ecosystems. The unselective fishing practices of industrialized fishing industries are causing destruction to many non-target species. The United Nations reported that 17% of fish stocks worldwide are currently overexploited, 52% are fully exploited, and 7% are depleted. This data shows that only 20% of the worldwide fish stocks are not being fished above capacity yet. Few Trust data on the amount of fish being caught worldwide is estimated to be 109 million metric tons annually, with 77 million metric tons being reported and 32 million metric tons being unreported. To put that in perspective, the 32 million metric tons of unreported fish catch is more than the weight of the population of the United States in total. Overfishing has been an issue since the mid-20th century. This is because efforts were put in place to increase the availability of fish, mostly because it was an affordable, protein-rich food, so the government tried to increase the fishing capacity in any way possible. National Geographic explains that those efforts included favorable policies, loans, and subsidies. All of these things combined created a rapid rise of the industrial fishing industry, not only in the US, but worldwide. The United States has 30 fish stocks on the overfishing list, which is when the harvest rate, a direct result of fishing activities, is too high, and 35 fish stocks included on the overfished list, which is when the population size of a stock is too low. This may be because of overfishing or environmental change. Some fish on the U.S. overfished or overfishing list include Chinook salmon, coho salmon, swordfish, yellowtail flounder, big-eye tuna, hogfish, winter flounder, Atlantic halibut, bluefin tuna, Alaska pollock, Atlantic cod, and red snapper. Majority of the fish mentioned before are very large in size, and this is because large fish are the first to go. They are also the slowest to reproduce, which makes them extremely vulnerable to overfishing. According to Seafood Watch, it will take decades before these fish populations recover. But for right now, as fish populations lose abundance, fishermen will move on to new species lower on the food web. Another issue that faces the U.S. and all over the world is illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. It is a global problem that threatens not only ocean ecosystems, but also puts the U.S. fishermen who follow both national and international fishing regulations at a disadvantage. The U.S. has combating IUU fishing as a top priority, but recommendations that have been made still need to be implemented, and this is why. While the U.S. is not the most directly affected by IUU fishing, like developing countries who depend on their fisheries for food security, it still harms the U.S. Since the U.S. imports most of its seafood, IUU fishing creates an imbalance of lower quality products in the seafood market and hinders the sustainability of global marine resources. The Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation Act is the primary law governing fisheries management in the United States federal waters. The act was first passed in 1976, and throughout the last couple of years, Congress has made attempts to amend the Magnuson-Stevens Act. This has been shuffled through the Senate with a very unclear future. This will do nothing to fix the policies needing amending. Revisions of the Magnuson-Stevens Act are needed. Recommendations of where these revisions should be focused include finding ways to minimize non-target catch, changing rebuilding timelines, and better implementing catch limits. The American Fisheries Society explains how fishing vessels today know exactly where they are spatially, exactly where their net is, and how much is in their net. This helps scientists create predictive models of where stocks can be caught, but more importantly, which parts of the ocean to avoid. This technology will lessen bycatch of endangered and unwanted species. Bycatch in the United States is a problem that needs to be addressed. Oceana.org reported that 17 to 22% of fish caught in the United States fisheries are discarded before reaching port, likely amounting to 2 billion pounds each year. Bycatch undermines the successful fisheries management. If this problem can be combated, then the United States fisheries would not only be more resilient, but also have a much higher economic viability of our coasts. In the same article, Oceana makes several recommendations on how to combat bycatch. One is to count everything because everything counts, making sure fishermen document everything captured even if it's discarded. It also suggests implementing bycatch reduction incentives, creating incentives through fisheries management plans so crews will be more likely to use devices which deter certain species away from the boat and avoiding hotspots. In the United States today, marine fisheries are mandated to rebuild the biomass of overfished stocks to levels that support maximum sustainable yields in as short of a time period as possible. If you rebuild stocks using an age structure, there is a higher chance that it will be more resilient to natural variability and environmental conditions. Rebuilding is an important tool for a more sustainable stock. There should not be the same decided time frame for each species, because if they have not returned to a sustainable level after that time, then catch limits fall, creating negative economic impacts. Catch limits allow for a more science-based management plan. It allows for the input from the scientific community when it comes to the acceptable biological catch and how that must be less than the overfishing limit. While this is already in place in the Magnuson-Stevens Act, there needs to be more room for responsive management if a scientific development comes through. Catch shares are important because they assign each fisherman a percentage of the overall allowable catch. That property right gives the fisherman a stake in the long-term health of the fishery. If the fishery improves, the value of the catch share increases, and if overfishing occurs, that value declines. Catch shares also encourage fishermen to reduce bycatch. Fisheries need to have better legislation and protection, not only for the ocean's ecosystems, but also for the fishermen in the United States. For example, the New England cod fishery, which has collapsed, meaning that the population is at 10% or less of its historic levels, as told by the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch, makes it increasingly difficult for fishermen and all the associated professions to make a living. So I urge you, since you have the chance to work directly with the 8 fisheries management councils, to figure out what can be done to make the United States fisheries as sustainable as possible, while also pushing reforms for the Magnuson-Stevens Act in Congress. The fish in the ocean can't speak for themselves, so you have to speak on their behalf. Because we have the technology to protect them, just no way to effectively enforce its use.